It is always such a pleasure to be here with you all, and also just really appreciate your time because, as we talked about, we're trying to fit things in between one thing and another thing all day long. And you spending however much time you can spend with us today is really a gift to us as well. So, thank you so much for being here. So, we're going to start off with something just a little bit out of the box in the sense of not related to this content. And I'm going to have you go over to Menti. Now, Menti, if you've never used it before, is just a presentation platform where you can ask questions. You can either use the QR code or you can go to menti.com and enter the code there, and it's going to ask you a question. So let's go over to Menti. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second and go over to my Menti screen. Here we go. And refresh it because it says you've reached the end of your presentation. I was showing it to Joey earlier. All right, so you should be able to see a question that says, if you could instantly become an expert in one skill or hobby, what would it be? So you're just going to answer that question for us. And then we'll,
yeah. Can you put the website and code back up? You flashed it so fast I didn't quite.
Oh, yeah, of course. Well, you can use the QR code that's on the screen right now. Can you see the screen?
Okay.
And Jill, the link and the code are also in chat.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Right. Or you can go to menti.com and use this code up at the top as well. Kayaking. Ooh, I love kayaking. I once kayaked in the Ligurian Sea in Italy, and that is a story for another day because my husband almost didn't make it out of there alive. we were arguing on the kayak because he wasn't paddling. Skydiving. Oh, that's really cool. I've also been skydiving. Anyone else in chat likes kayaking or skydiving? Ever been skydiving? Pottery. Yeah, pottery looks like, doesn't pottery look like a skill that you're like, I could do that, but then you know in reality it would be really hard. Leadership. Yeah, I'm expert in leadership is challenge. Human design. Oh, interesting. Tennis. I love tennis. Now I just play it on VR, so I don't have to move around as much. It is fun though. All right, let's see if anybody else. Awesome. So I just like to start with like a little bit of kind of thinking about something other than what we're about to talk about, kind of, you know, what we enjoy doing and get us in a headspace that's kind of more visionary than just, you know, trying to get through every step of our day. So we're going to go back to the presentation and really get started into talking about what we're really here for today, which is evaluating your learning strategy. All right, let me get my screen back up. Apologies, my Zoom keeps disappearing on me for some reason. All right, here we go. All right. Okay, so we're going to get started. And before I dive in, I'd just like to know what you hope to gain from today's session. So if you wouldn't mind putting in chat just what drew you to this session, what you're hoping to get out of it, so that I can make sure that I'm covering anything that you're interested in. Joey has dropped in the participant guide into chat, so you can also download that out of chat. And you can follow along with the participant guide, make notes, etc. if you want to print it or just have it with you and make notes on it later. So what are you interested in learning today? So as Joey said, I'm Michelle King. I'm your guide for today's journey into enhancing learning strategies for organizational success. And we're going to get started, but I'm just curious. I haven't seen anybody put anything in chat. Is there anything you really want to get out of this session? Tips on making sure I'm evaluating my training program adequately. Okay, thank you, Diane. I really appreciate that. Anyone else have anything there? And you could come off mic if you want to as well. Aligning learning initiatives with business goals attracting me today. Oh, you're new in the L&D industry. Well, welcome, Natalie. Is it Natalie or Nathalie? I don't want to miss
Natalie. Thank you, Michelle.
Natalie, very pretty. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm hoping that whatever you're interested in getting out of this, that I'm going to touch on that. But if not, please feel free to ask questions. I am here to help you. And I'm here to make sure that you have everything you need from this particular presentation. So ask away in the chat and feel free to chime in on other questions that people have too. We learn from each other. I'm a firm believer in each one teach one, which means that we all have something to learn from each other. Jill says how to take into account different people's learning styles. That's also really good. That's really important, right? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So today, the learning objectives that we're going to cover are these three, which is the importance of learning strategy, evaluation, some popular evaluation frameworks, practical tools and techniques. And we're also going to talk about how to leverage AI in learning. I use AI all the time for different things, and can talk about, if you have questions, how I use it. I will tell you that if you are interested at all in learning how to quickly get diagrams, so like workflows, you're trying to design something and you have all the steps, but you don't want to have to do all the work in putting it in a diagram. I'll put something in chat later when we get to the AI portion to tell you how you can have Chat GPT write the code for you for an application called Mermaid. And then you just copy and paste it in there and it makes the diagram for you. It does sequencing, workflow diagrams, XY graphs, all kinds of things. And guess what? It's free. So all kinds of really cool tools that you can use. So that's what we're going to be covering today. By the end, what we hope is that you'll have some actionable insights to apply in your organization. So why is it important to have a learning strategy at all, right? So when we think about this and you think like, what is it that why would I need to have a learning strategy? I mean, we know what the business goals are. We understand what we're trying to accomplish. Why do I also need a strategy for learning? So I want you to think of the strategy as GPS for your organization's development. So the learning portion of any organization, even if it's the tiniest, even if you're one person, your primary goal is to help the organization continue to develop. And that can be the business itself, as far as like learning tools and different processes, or it can be individual development. But either way, the development of the human beings in the organization is really the central focus of the learning group, right? So just as GPS needs updates to reflect new roads and conditions, your learning strategy also needs regular evaluation to ensure it's aligned with your current business goals and effectively driving performance, because that's your primary job. And I will say that now more than ever, this is important because we're seeing such huge shifts in work. The introduction of AI, how technology is advancing, jobs are changing. The World Economic Forum has been predicting this for several years now and what was going to happen. And so understanding that, because the only thing we can count on is change, that having a learning strategy and being able to adapt that learning strategy as the business needs change is crucial to being an effective learning leader. Now, I like to bring in stats to what I'm talking about and research, because I think it's important to lend credibility to what I'm saying. Who is this woman with her opinions about this? But I want to say that this is all research backed when I'm teaching you. And so a learning strategy isn't just about delivering content, it's about aligning training with organizational goals to boost performance and efficiency. And so by evaluating our learning strategies, we're going to ensure that our training programs are effective, relevant, and aligned with our business objectives. And this process really helps us make data-driven decisions and justify investments in training and continuously improve. And this is, I will tell you, if you do this type of thing, if you invest yourself in a learning strategy and really commit to it, this is how you get resources within learning. Because as you know, if you work in learning at all, even if you're new to it, learning is not the money-making part of the organization unless you're doing training for customers. But if you're doing internal training focus, you're not making money for the company. So they're not likely to give you as many resources because of that, right? That's why sales gets all the resources. But what I want you to understand about why this is so important is because an impact of a learning strategy is really demonstrated within these stats. So the first one is skills development and adaptability. So 83% of managers observed increased motivation among team members who are given time to learn in their work week. And I have all of the data for this. So if you're interested, and I can send you afterwards some of the information to back this up. So what you're doing is you're helping create motivation. And this is one of the primary things that keeps people engaged at work. And engagement is critical to work success. For increased engagement and retention, 94% of employees said they would stay at a company longer if it invested in their learning and development. And this is even more true for Gen Z. They are very interested in their learning and development. So having a plan for that is crucial to your business success. In leadership cultivation, organizations that prioritize leadership development through continuous learning see a 9-time increase in leaders' sense of engagement and a 2.4 times increase in retention rates. So just involving yourself in learning that's for leaders is another way to increase your company's retention levels and engagement levels. Enhanced culture, 87% of business leaders believe that developing the right workplace model, which includes continuous learning and innovation, is crucial to their organization's success, even though 24% feel their organization is very ready to address this. So this is another thing. As a learning leader, it is really your responsibility to continue to push the organization forward by being able to bring them a learning strategy that is effective, because the reality is that most companies are not ready to meet the needs of the workplace as it's evolving. And the other thing, and most importantly, is it improves performance. So according to a study highlighted by McKinsey, companies that commit to continuous improvement can see dramatic reductions in time to market. And citing an example where product testing time was cut by more than 80% through incremental improvements in team collaboration and process optimization. And those things can only happen if the learning organization is part of the conversation. Trust me, I have spent lots of years fighting to get a seat when the project is starting instead of after the project's over. Amen, right? Because they were not order takers. We are here to help develop the strategy of the learning organization. Even if you are an instructional designer, even if you are new to an organization, it is imperative to understand learning strategy. Okay, so learning and development is not just for individual advancement, as I said, it is for the organization. It is about meeting the business objectives of the organization. And I'm going to tell you the way that I did this with my team typically is I would take the top business objectives, and then we would discuss how what we were doing was helping to meet those objectives. Because a lot of times in learning, it's not a direct one-to-one correlation. I can't necessarily improve customer satisfaction, right, directly, but I can think about how we can use training initiatives to help improve the customer success people's interactions with our customers, which would improve customer satisfaction. So a lot of times it's not direct, it's indirect, but it is incredibly impactful. So when you start thinking about this, you have to think about how do we evaluate our current learning strategy, and also how do we create a learning strategy going forward? So what is a learning strategy evaluation consist of? How do we start evaluating our learning strategy? Well, you're going to have 4 components, right? You have a needs assessment, you have curriculum design, you have delivery methods, and you have outcomes and measurements. And you can't forget any of these. These are all critical. So when you think about needs assessment, just remember that's just identifying the gaps between where you are currently and where you need to go. So all you're trying to see is what is the need truly. And obviously when you work in learning, the first thing you learn is that the needs are way greater than you have capacity for. You always are going to have more needs than you have people to and resources to take care of that. So you have to learn how to prioritize that as well. And we'll talk about that. The second thing is curriculum design, right? So you need to have educational content, and you need to be thinking about the strategies around that. So how are you going to design your curriculum? And design your curriculum is, I could do obviously a whole other class on this, but you really have to think from an innovative point of view, because you have multi-generational workforces now, and people like to learn in different ways. And so you have to think about how you're going to actually engage learners, because creating a whole bunch of training that doesn't engage your learners isn't going to help you move your business objectives forward or meet your business objectives. The next thing you have to think about is delivery methods. How are you going to deliver this? So what ways are you going to provide this educational content? And you can think about this as, are you going to do blended learning in person, online? A lot of things have focused on online because, of course, it's cheaper and more accessible, and people can do it in a time that they choose. But that doesn't necessarily mean that is the best method for delivering that type of training. So you have to think about the types of training and how you're delivering them. And then, of course, you have to have outcomes measurement. So how are you assessing the effectiveness of your performance evaluation? How are you assuring that what you're doing is really going to get you where you need to go? So that's part of what we're going to cover today, is thinking about these different steps and how you're going to deliver against them to get to what you need. Now, there are many ways, there are many methods for evaluating organizational learning. We're going to talk about Kirkpatrick several times today because it is sort of the base standard of how we do evaluation. So Kirkpatrick essentially is a model that focuses on 4 levels. Most of you are probably familiar with it. The first is reaction, then learning, then behavior, then results. Right. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. So this is one way that you can start to conduct learning initiative evaluations, is you can just get surveys that help you understand how people feel about their training. Are they applying this, etc. It's a little bit more complicated to get behavior and results. Reaction and learning are the easiest ones to get. But there are ways to do that. There are surveys that you can use, or different kinds of focus groups, et cetera, to get more information on behavior results. The other thing is you can use learning analytics and data mining. If you have an LMS, which most companies do, some don't though, you can use your LMS to mine data. You can track completion rates, use advanced analytics, correlate learning data with performance data. So it's very rich. The LMS is typically very rich with data that you can use to do some level of evaluation. And then, of course, you can also do 360-degree feedback and performance assessments. Now, 360-degree feedback isn't always something that companies like to do. There's a lot of kind of feelings about 360s. But I know that a lot of organizations do like engagement surveys or pulse surveys, and a lot of times you can get information from that as long as it's not directly personalized. In other words, it's not like exactly about this manager, but overall you can get information on leadership trust scores, or how people are performing against their goals, etc. So these are 3 different methods you can use right now for how to start conducting learning initiative evaluation. So the first thing is we need to figure out where we are, and we need to figure out what data we have available to us so that we can start to make some decisions around that. So the next thing you want to think about is that there are common challenges that you're going to face, right, when you conduct learning evaluation. So let's imagine I'm new to an organization. I come in and I'm the new learning person, and I want to understand how things are working, where we are, how satisfied people are with what's going on. So I go and get this information from, some of the Kirkpatrick information, from surveys. I get LMS information. Maybe there's some performance information. Hopefully there's some 360 information, or at least some kind of surveys that the company is conducting. And all of that is great. I have all this, but you're also going to face some types of obstacles when you're trying to gather and interpret this data. And it's important to understand those, because then you can mitigate them. So the first is misalignment of learning initiatives with organization goals. So a lot of times what you're going to find is that actually you have all these learning initiatives, but they are not connected to the overall organizational goals. So that's a problem. It's a strategic objective of the company has to filter down into what we're doing in learning. So it's not contributing to meaningful business outcomes. So that might be one of the first things you find. You also might find that nobody's conducted a needs assessment. And I will tell you that you're going to find that. That is a very common thing. I go in and connect. I go in and help people do needs assessments all the time. And if you're able to stay to the end, I will send you my personal, very professional needs assessment that you can use for free, that I have honed over the years. and it will be very helpful to you. So needs assessments are really important, but what happens is people don't do them. They just go to managers and the managers say, oh, you know what we need is this. And they just take them at their word and then they go make training around that. And so you really have to have a comprehensive needs assessment. I need to know, where do we require development? Where can we do training that is relevant and impactful? And I'm going to use tools like surveys and interviews and performance data analysis so that I can get this information. But in sometimes when you try to do that, guess what happens? You meet resistance. And listen, change is hard for everyone. And part of the reason it's hard is because frankly, life is exhausting. And I say that not to be glib at all. We are living in a world in which we receive the same amount of information we receive in 1 week today. About 40 years ago, we received that in an entire year. An entire year. Resistance is futile. It never happens, right? Right. So we are inundated with information and technology, and people get really tired from making decisions and having to learn new things. So it's important to understand why the resistance is there. You're going to get resistance, but you need to understand the underlying root of that resistance. And possibly it is that this company has rolled out 16 new processes in the last 3 months, and they just can't take one more thing that they have to learn, right? So you do need to consider that and also understand how to approach that when you're attempting to deal with resistance, right? So my stance is, when someone starts resisting, I just start listening and I shut up and say, okay, let me hear what this person has to say, because I'm going to find underneath that what the root is to why they don't want to do it or why they think it won't work. And I assure you, doing that helps you to have a better conversation with them and look for the places where you can meet their resistance and help them to overcome it. But don't think of the resistance as being personal. It is really, a lot of it is decision fatigue. Well, and just anecdotally, I'm curious if any of you know how many decisions on average we make in a day. Does anybody know the answer to that question or can guess? Let's see. 5,000? Well, nope, higher. 20, higher, Mike. Is it Mickey? Yeah, okay, higher, Mickey. Anyone else? Oh, now we're going. He's like, I'm going to double that. It's 35,000. We make 35,000 decisions a day. Do you understand now why we're tired? We're tired. When someone brings us one more thing, we're like, I can't make any more decisions. Right. So just remember that resistance is not personal. It is about the fact that these people are tired, or there's one more change, or you're coming in and they're like, you don't really understand us. So one of the things I will recommend highly to you as a learning leader is, please learn how to do active listening. Make sure that you are doing way more listening than talking, because people have lots of feelings about training, especially when it's been poor in the past or ineffective, or they feel like they've had to go to training that wasn't applicable to them. So just understand their position, because you've had to do it too. I'm sure you have. Yeah. Now, Dan, this is absolutely true. I don't want to decide what's for dinner because I'm tired of making decisions, right? Or what restaurant I want to go to, Christy. This is why when you get in a group and people say, well, where do you want to eat? People are like, I don't know. I don't care, because they're tired of making decisions. Just give me some food. I'm fine. Print me some food, right? At this point, I'm still waiting for the Star Trek version of Earl Grey hot, and it just appears for me. Although I will say in Star Trek, they definitely indicate that the food is not the same as when you get it cooked, when you're on a planet somewhere. So, still never measuring up. I still take it. So the other thing is inadequate measurement of the impact of training programs. Now, I will say that beyond the sort of resistance you're going to feel, this is the number one problem, right? Is that people have, created training, and maybe they use Kirkpatrick's, but they're only using level 1, which we'll talk about. So it's like, oh, they liked it or they didn't like it. That doesn't tell me anything. You know, people are surveyed to death, so they don't love answering a bunch of questions. And let's be honest, people only fill out surveys that are acting are requesting that they comment on performance of something or whether they liked it, if they really, really liked it or they hated it. Everybody in between is like, I don't really feel like I need to fill this out. It was fine. So just keep in mind that if you're not getting a lot of responses, also if you have a survey, that can be an indication that people don't have feelings for it strongly in one way or the other, which is also a problem, right? But not measuring it is the biggest problem. So you need to think about what kinds of measurements or evaluation models you're going to use so that when you're creating a learning strategy, and even when you're evaluating your learning strategy, but also when you're creating this learning strategy, that you have a way of measuring things. It's so critical. Okay. So you might be thinking to yourself, this sounds exhausting, Michelle, and I don't know that performing a learning strategy evaluation is really going to be worth it to me. But here's what I can tell you from my own personal experience, but also let's hear from Jack Welch, who is the former CEO of General Electric. So, an organization's ability to learn and translate that learning into action rapidly is the ultimate competitive advantage. And it really is, because when you are empowered through learning to understand your environment, the business objectives, what you're supposed to do, when the objectives are clear and the training supports that, you are actually creating autonomy and motivation automatically. And that is our goal with the people who are employees of a company, is that they have internal motivation and that they have autonomy to make their decisions or to move forward without having to involve a lot of other people in their decision making. So this is a really critical piece of this, is to understand that learning is an advantage to an organization, even if they resist it, because it doesn't make a lot of money for them. What it does do is save them money, but that's a harder argument to make. So when I approach it, I do it a very different way. I go about talking to them about how we can help them meet their business goals primarily. All right, so let's talk about now how you actually can go about doing this. Some of the things that I think are really important to think about when you're having this discussion with your organization leaders, to say, well, why do we need this learning strategy? Well, as I mentioned, it enhances organizational performance. So it ensures your training aligns with your business outcomes like productivity and customer satisfaction. And when you think of this, I want you to look at your organization's goals, and even if they don't resonate with you, it's like increase sales by 3%. You're like, I work in learning inside the organization in customer support or engineering. Like, I don't have any influence on that, but you do. So what you have to really think about more is, how does the group that I'm supporting and learning affect sales? So engineering, it's how they're developing the product and what they're doing to increase sales by releasing products that, I don't know, work or actually enhance the product in a way that customers have been waiting for. With customer success, is how are those interactions? Are we able to get customers what they need when they need it? What kind of training can support that? We found, I know, in a lot of our organizations, that Gen Z, and these are, by the way, generalizations, not meant to be personal, don't like to talk on the phone. So one of the problems in customer success is getting them to call people because they don't want to. So you have to think about, like, how do I help meet these needs and get these my learning objectives aligned with the business learning objectives. And then knowing that you can align this in a certain way. So how to you conduct regular strategy reviews between HR and L&D and business leaders. This is what I was telling you. One of the hardest things to overcome is being an order taker in an organization. This is what L&D kind of got shifted to a long time ago, and it's really hard to work our way back. But make sure you've got those meetings with HR and business leaders. Understand what their priorities are, because you can't meet the need if you don't understand the priorities. Design learning objectives around the business goals. Don't design a learning objectives that are only specific to, oh, we're going to learn how to communicate better with customers, but connect those to the actual business goal. And that's what I always did. And that's why I was successful at getting resources, because I was able to show how what my team was doing was directly connected to the business goals. And then incorporate feedback from leaders to ensure the relevancy of training. Now, I will add to that, incorporate feedback from the learners that also need to help you ensure the relevancy of the training. I don't know, anybody else, you can, give me a thumbs up or whatever, but anyone else have to take training that was not applicable to them whatsoever at work? It's just like, why am I taking this training? I had to take this training one time. We had to take this compliance training that everybody in the organization had to take. And all of the scenarios were like, you're out golfing with this client and they tried to like make some back deal. And I was like, I work in learning. Who's going to try to, who's bribing me? Because they're not really going to get much out of this, right? Anyone else experience that? Where you're like, why am I taking this training? It's not relevant to me whatsoever, but you're being forced to do that. Oh, in banking. Oh, Diane, I bet you had to do that all the time. Oh my gosh, how frustrating. And then you just feel like your time is being wasted. So now you have a negative view of training. That's the other thing, right? So you're kind of fighting against that because people have had to endure a lot of terrible training. Just let's be true. Let's be true to that. But when they know that the training they're doing is aligned with the business goals, it's helping them meet their goals, they're much more motivated. The other thing is that it supports change management. And I can't tell you how many conversations I've had to have with executives to say, you want things to change. That's what learning is here for. We're here to help you support change management. Because frankly, it does things, a lot of changes that are made aren't considered all what the learning curve is, or how people are fatigued, or how we can do this in a way that is the least intrusive for people. Bruce says a learner needs analysis also allows you to focus your limited L&D resources on the most important needs of learners. Absolutely. Needs analysis for the organization, learner needs analysis. All of these are critical to helping you gather the data that's necessary to create a learning strategy. So when you're supporting change management, you want to think about this and say, well, hey, this is how learning aligns with new initiatives that are happening, any kind of transformation, new technologies, market shifts. It's going to equip employees with skills for new challenges and workflows, support smoother transitions. And so when you want to align it, you want to think about talking to leaders about developing learning modules specific to those upcoming changes, and also involve L&D early in planning for change initiatives to tailor learning content. So remember, my first thing that I do when I go into a new organization is I go meet all the learning people, and then I go meet the business leaders and HR, and I start setting up meetings right away once a month to talk to them. Because otherwise, you're just going to be pushed to the side, and your contributions aren't going to help drive things forward, which is what L&D's responsibility is. The other thing it does is improve employee retention and engagement. Now, let me tell you, Gallup does a poll, a survey every single year. They've been doing it for 24 years now. And what they're looking for is how engaged or disengaged employees are at work. And basically the curve is, it's not flat, but it's like a little slight bumps in there. And what they find over time, and it varies slightly, is that about 30% of people say they're engaged at work. And about 13% of people are actively disengaged at work. Okay. So you think, well, 30% engaged, that's not great, but I mean, it's more than that's disengaged. But here's how I want you to think about it. So imagine you have a team of 10 people, and their job is to pull a boulder up a hill using ropes. That's the job. There's 10 of them, and that's what they're responsible for. So if we take those statistics and apply them, then 3 people are actively, constantly working to bring this boulder up the hill, right? Then you've got about 5 people who are like, they're doing it sometimes. Sometimes they're really helping. Sometimes they're not. They're both actively engaged and actively disengaged. And then you have the people who are actively disengaged. You have 2 people who are actively disengaged. You know what they're doing? They're cutting the ropes. So how long is it going to take you to actually get that boulder up the hill if you have even 2 people on that team of 10 that are actively disengaged? So when I say that employee retention and engagement is critically important to the organization from both a performance perspective and also from a retention perspective. And retention costs when you lose people, it costs the company money. So retaining employees is important, and you can't retain employees if they're not engaged. So you want to make sure you also are aligning learning programs with career progression needs enhancing their job satisfaction, engagement. And then you want to make sure employees feel valued and are more likely to invest in their roles when they see clear advancement paths. And that's why development isn't always linear, right? We're not always like going step, step, step. Sometimes it's broad, but being able to create programs that help the organization both create, wide and tall skills, things that are going to help you advance and things that are just going to deepen your skill set are important. So you want to link your learning and development opportunities to career advancement whenever possible. Create and publicize clear path supported by specific training programs. You may not be in charge of the career pathing at your work. That might be just part of HR's job and you're not that in that piece of it. But what you can do is work with HR to make sure that the training programs support that career pathing. And then make sure you regularly discuss career development with employees and incorporate their feedback to refine the learning programs. One of the things you have to know about being an L&D is that you are continually, constantly looking for feedback. We need to know how you're doing. Do you like this? Is this engaging? What could we do that would improve this, etc.? And I want you to write this down if I still have you right now. And that is, I don't ever ask the question, what can we improve? Never, because it's a very ambiguous question. It's going to become very personalized and connected to what that person feels. And there's no objectivity left in that question. And also, a lot of times people don't know how to answer it because they're not the expert, you are. So, to asking someone how a course can be improved, unless they hated something, they're not going to have a response to that. And it's an uncomfortable question. So, write this down. What would make this even better? That's the question I use. Because you're going to assume that it's good. Now, that person can still say, well, I didn't think it was good in the first place. They're welcome to say that, right? But you also are going to put people in a positive mindset where they actually can give you feedback you can take action on. And if you're interested in that, I am doing another webinar next week on creating surveys for actionable feedback. And that's a good one. So if you want to, make sure you sign up for that. But it's really important that how you word the questions and asking what would make it even better really helps people to focus on improvement rather than criticism. I like to ask, what's one thing you'd add, one thing you take away? Yeah, Mickey, that's also a really good one as well. I think sometimes people, it can be really personal for them. So, you don't get enough data that helps you drive an action. So it's like one person might say this and another person might say that. And it's like, okay, I kind of have to evaluate their responses, but I think all feedback is important. So when you ask the questions, just make sure you're asking something that's going to help drive action for you. And when you leave it too open-ended, sometimes people give you feedback and you're like, I have so much feedback, but none of it's connected, so I don't really know how to put it together. Well, that's a course for next week. So let's go back over to Menti right now, and because we're about to discuss the frameworks that we are using and what ones I kind of recommend or it's for you to think about. But I want to hear what frameworks or models you might be using. So if you have used any kind of model or framework for evaluating your learning strategy, go over to Menti and let's enter that in and we will take a look at what everybody has to say. Let me get over here. Okay, we're going to stop sharing because my thing is being weird. Okay, thank you. I love when technology does not cooperate with you. Okay, let's see. What methods do you currently use to evaluate your learning strategy? Let's see. We had the last time I did this, we had some really interesting answers, actually, things I hadn't heard of before. So, it's a good thing to share this with people. And if you don't have anything, just, you can say, we don't have one, right? Kirkpatrick's or Phillips. Yeah, we're going to talk about Phillips and another one called CIPP today. Any others that you've used for that? Kirkpatrick. Yeah, see, Kirkpatrick's kind of the standard. Oh, OKRs. Oh, and KPIs. Yes, I thought that was another word and I was trying to sound it out and then I realized it was OKRs. OKRs are great. If you've never used OKRs before, it's a really great one to learn, especially because OKRs really focus you on the action to meet the goal and help you to write things that are aspirational, but also have a real clear path to getting it done, and continually evaluating what you're doing in that. So OKRs are great. I love that. Dr. Chung has a 12-step. Oh, interesting. If anybody has link to, like the person who put that, if you have a link to something that the other participants might be able to look at, that would be great, because I have not heard of that one. 12 steps seems like a lot, but if it's comprehensive, I love it. Also, if you have any links to the OKRs, I have some stuff I can send people on that. Improve company KPIs, right? So everybody has different ways that they might be evaluating learning strategies. And so you might be going top down, you might be going bottom up, but what I want you to think about is that there are frameworks that really help you with these evaluations we're going to talk about in just a second. So let me stop and go back over to my presentation. All right. I have to move things around every time. It's very annoying. All right, there we go. All right, I'm back in business. Okay. Okay, so frameworks and models for evaluation. Now, you can use, as you saw from that other screen, you can use anything you want. I mean, you can use different, maybe you designed your own. There is no hard and fast rule that you have to use these models. Like, this is the only thing available to you. So what I want you to think about when we're going through this, and we're going to do some case studies as well to show you how to apply these, but just think about maybe how you might want to use one of these or how that might work in your organization. So the first one, of course, is shocker, everyone's surprised, is Kirkpatrick's, right? So Kirkpatrick's has 4 levels, and it evaluates training across these levels. So the reaction level, the learning level, the behavior level, and the results level. And it really does help to collect valuable data to improve your training programs and try to align them with the strategic goals. So I want you to think of it like a 4-course meal. So the reaction is like the appetizer, right? And then the learning is the main course, and then the behavior is the dessert, and the results are the coffee. And so all on it's one meal, and it's different stages of that meal, right? So each level builds on the previous, and it gives it a complete experience of a training evaluation. So you're looking at, how do people directly respond to training? Did they like it? Did they not like it? That's level 1, right? Level 2 is, what knowledge and skills do employees require during training? So you usually get that from like pre and post assessment, surveys, sometimes direct evaluation. But then it gets harder. How do the behaviors change as a result of training? And I'm curious, from your perspective, anyone that's on here, if you want to type in chat or even come off mute, is there a way that you use Kirkpatrick's to evaluate behavior, or what challenges do you find in evaluating behavior and impact if you use Kirkpatrick's? Because I feel that's the most challenging piece of it personally, right? So how does the behavior change? Well, how do you know that? How do you measure that? And so sometimes it's really about revisiting it, going back to people and seeing basically their self-reporting about their behavior change. Sometimes it's using like the engagement survey to do a comparison of the leaders' evaluation before and after. This is why 360s are important. Yeah, direct observation, Mickey, is also a really great way to do that. Yeah, CSAT and INSAT. Yeah, Bruce, and this is the thing, is like a lot of companies are very strict about what you can use for measurement as well, which is kind of challenging when you're trying to look at behavior and impact. I worked for a company, a global company, and they were based out of Germany. And in Germany, if you're not familiar, they have what's an employee union, but it's for every employee in the entire country. It's called the Workers' Council. And they are very strict about what data you can get, because they don't want you to do anything that could create retaliation against somebody. So we couldn't get a lot of data on employees that were outside of the US because of that. So it can be challenging when there is only certain information available to you. So Joe says, for evaluating behavior, I combine self-reporting with manager observation. Some behaviors are tracked, salespeople making notes from sales calls and CRM software. Yeah. Chrissy says behavior-based assessment, self-manager, 360 for pre-post behavior change after training competencies are key. I agree. And so as you see, every organization has different rules or different ways that they approach this. The important thing is for you to decide how you're going to address that level if you're going to use this for training evaluation. So how do you address behavior and impact? And what will your company allow, right? Like as Bruce said, we only are allowed these two things. We're not allowed anything else. So it might be harder to figure that out, but just think about it for if you're going to use it. Now, the other kinds of models you can use is something called the Phillips model for training evaluation. Now, I just want to be clear, when you look at this, it looks a little scary, but it really is essentially Kirkpatrick's with one more level. So it adds a fifth level, and that focuses on the financial return on investment. So not only do I want to know what the reaction was, did they learn something, did their behavior change, what was the impact, but I also want to be able to prove that there was an ROI, there was a financial return, or it saved money, some kind of connection to the finances. So it's kind of basically quantifying the economic value by adding training, and that helps you to justify your learning expenditures. So sometimes people use it as a way to be like, hey, this is how much money we save, so it's a good investment to keep going this way. So you're adding like a cost benefit analysis to your meal. So remember, in Kirkpatrick's I said this, it's an appetizer, your main dish, the dessert, and coffee. And you have to think of it like Phillips is this cost benefit, ensuring you're not just enjoying the food, but you're getting the value for your money, right? So yeah, the food is really good, but then the check comes and it's like, oh, this is $500. You might not, even if the food was good, you might think, well, that wasn't a really good investment. But if it's $25, you might think it's the greatest investment ever. So that is a measurement and a way of being able to both justify your own budget, but also to prove that it's working. And that's one of the reasons people use Phillips. And then a third model, and as you said, I mean, there was Dr. Chung's 12 steps. I've never heard of that before. And like I said, if the person who put that wants to put something in chat about it, otherwise I'll look it up as well. But the other one that we can use is called CIPP. Has anyone heard of CIPP before this? If you have, put it in chat. I want to see what Christy said. Oh, Christy said, I would argue that L4 and L5 are the main course. Leaders have told me not to bother with L1, L2, design with application and above first. Yeah, and I think it depends on what you're really trying to do. Reaction still is important. I still need to know if people are enjoying the course, because if they're not enjoying it, it's really not going to benefit anybody. But I agree that the main course could be just the top two. It's a primi and secondi if you Italian, right? So it's a primary and the second course really of that. So yeah, I agree. Oh, thanks, Jill, for joining. So CIPP model, it's a very different framework. It's comprehensive. It assesses different aspects of program planning, implementation, effectiveness, and it helps guide decision making through a project's life cycle. And that's why I like it, because it also helps guide your decision making. So I want you to think of CIPP model as a life cycle of a plant. So it assesses context, input, process, and product. So think of this as the soil quality is the context, the seeds are the input, the growth process is the process, and the final fruit is the product. So each stage is crucial for a healthy outcome, right? And so let's take a look at some of the case studies around this in just a moment. But first, I just want to summarize this section by saying that, when you choose the right evaluation model, you really need to look at all 6 of these aspects. What are your organizational objectives? What is the scope and scale of the training programs? What are they now? When I went into, not my last job, but my job before that, there was all kinds of training, but it was outmoded. It was all over the place. No one had it organized. We didn't know where it was. We didn't know who owned things. And so, you might walk into a complete and total mess. You might walk into nothing. Like there's really nothing. A lot of times learning is going on in the organization and there's really no structure around it, right? And it is happening whether you're in charge of it or not. It's still happening. And then the model's ability to provide actionable results. If, as Christy said, if 1 and 2 aren't going to get you anywhere, you're not going to know anything about that. then you should focus on 4 and 5 for Kirkpatrick's if you have that ability within your organization. But you might use other models. And again, you can also create your own. You can use Kirkpatrick's or some other models and create one that really works for you. You're not beholden to these, right? It's like Bloom's taxonomy. I'm not beholden to Bloom's taxonomy. I don't have to follow it exactly when I'm writing up my learning objectives. It informs me. And that's what these are here to do, to inform your decision. Because we trust that you are people who are, capable, competent, intelligent people who can devise your own systems that work for your organization as well. You really, really want to make sure you understand stakeholder needs. Who are all the stakeholders? Make sure you identify all of them, and then what are their needs, so that you can make sure you can prioritize things effectively, and also you learn who you need to inform, who you need to collaborate with, who you need to not even bother with, because yes, they're a stakeholder, but they don't really care. They just want you to go do what you do. And who you might need to escalate things to if things aren't going the way that you need. So stakeholder needs, resource availability. I can tell you from working in L&D for a really long time that nobody asks you if you have enough resources to do the long list of things they want you to do. They don't go, so can you get that? Don't you have enough resources? So you really need to do some assessment on resource availability, because you can't speak to it and address it if you don't know. And people overwhelm themselves over. I am also a leadership coach. I can't begin to tell you how many people I've coached that are just like, I have so much work now because no one ever talked about resource availability. And then, of course, the last thing is the flexibility of the model. Can you adapt this model? Is it going to adapt with you, or do you get using this model and now you're like, well, we got to throw Kirkpatrick's out because we really need to have ROI now? And really you wouldn't have to, because Phillips is kind of an extension of Kirkpatrick's. But if you were to use another model, is it flexible enough for you to make adjustments, right? Sometimes there are too many cooks in the kitchen. There are too many stakeholders, but that's why I think it's really important to prioritize them and kind of put them in a matrix, because some people, like, yeah, they're a stakeholder, but they're really not going to say anything about it. They just want it. They just want to know that it got done. So you really need to know who you have to interact with. But yes, everybody wants to say something about it, right? Because everybody wants to have input into learning when they don't even necessarily have any experience or background in learning. Okay, so let's look at some case studies that apply these models so we can get some understanding of how it works in real life, right? So the first one is finance. So this is just a finance services case study, and they use Kirkpatrick. So they used it for their sales training. Like, think of it about like upgrading their car's engine. So they fine-tuned reaction, learning, behavior, and results. And this achieved significant performance improvements. And in this case study, essentially, they introduced a new sales training program, and they wanted to see if it was going to be effective. So they used Kirkpatrick's to evaluate it. And notice that for behavior, what they did was they did evaluations to show whether or not this was being effectively applied by the sales team, the training that they had taken. And they looked at, what are your sales metrics? Are they any better? Is there more positive customer feedback? So you don't always have to get it directly from the person. You don't always have to observe. There are other things in the organization that can give you metrics. So for instance, I had a team that we were trying to do a lot of things. We're trying to help them be more effective in dealing with this complex software that they were all supporting. But the other thing we were trying to do was reduce the number of times they were going to the highest level, what they're called solutions architects, level customer support person to get information, because they were being bothered all day long by people who just didn't know where things were. So we did an assessment on that based upon partially how many times they were opening tickets to the solutions engineers and how could we reduce that. So you have to look around your organization for places to get metrics that can align things with your business goals. Don't just be satisfied with surveys. There's lots of information in your organization. And so 6 months after the training, and this is where they measured results, the firm noted measurable improvements in sales performance and revenue growth. So they were able to tie that back to the training program. So they refined and expand their training program after that, and this is how they evaluated it. So when you're thinking about evaluating a learning strategy, think about how they went about looking at behaviors here, looking at measurement here. It's just one framework you can use. Then we have a healthcare provider's case study. They use the Philips ROI. Now, what they wanted to do was demonstrate that there was a return on investment for their leadership development program. So it's like investing in better equipment and seeing a dramatic increase in patient care and efficiency, right? So they used Kirkpatrick's levels 1 through 4 and evaluated it based on that reaction, learning, behavior, and business impacts. And they got strong results. But they added a fifth level, which was financial analysis, which assessed the program's cost savings from reduced staff turnover, remember retention, and enhanced patient outcomes. So they're getting feedback from the customers, customer satisfaction, CSAT, whatever you like to call it. And they were also getting stats on turnover. And that showed them that they had a return of $2.50 for every dollar spent. So that's a pretty good investment. You invest $1, you get $2.50 in return. That's not bad, right? So they were able to prove not only was the program effective, but it was saving the hospital money, the healthcare provider money. All right, so the last one is an educational institution case study, and this one is where they use the CIPP model. So they were really trying to get enrollment in their higher enrollment in their MBA program and also better completion rates because they just weren't getting good enrollment. The completion rates were low. So they did a context evaluation. They wanted to see like what does the marketplace look like? So they sent out some surveys, how can we be more flexible? How can we align our courses to make them more attractive? Then they got input evaluation. So they did resource assessments on faculty expertise and tech infrastructure. And that led to investments in new learning programs and our platforms, and content development. Then they did process evaluation. So they got feedback and engagement from the students. And then they continuously monitored that during the rollout. And then finally, a product evaluation, which showed that there were significant improvements in graduation rates, post-graduation employment, and student satisfaction. So they were able to apply that model to be able to prove that, and see, this is a continuous improvement model. Whereas you're evaluating with Kirkpatrick's and Philips, this one you're evaluating and improving as you're going. And so instead of waiting to gather all the information and making a decision, and this is why this model is actually quite flexible once you learn how to use it. But I want you to be thinking about will one of these work for me? Will one of these work in my organization? So now you think about, okay, I have all of these frameworks and models. I have all of this information on how I can go about doing evaluation. So how do I develop my evaluation plan now? And really, there are several steps to it, but you need to have a strategy just like you do for everything else. And of course, every strategy starts with defining clear objectives. And I know it's funny because we say this all the time, like, oh yeah, you have to have clear objectives. But again, I'm a manager, leadership coach, and I can just tell you in all honesty, that is the number one thing that we have the most problem with in work, is that people don't define clear objectives. They define ambiguous objectives. Well, I need you to do this, and we're trying to get this done, but we don't talk about what are those objectives, what are you trying to meet, it's not just what your goals are, but how are you going about achieving those goals. And then once you have actually clear objectives of what you're trying to do, you want to choose an evaluation model. Again, you can use one of the three I've talked about today. Maybe you want to check out Dr. Chung's 12-step. Maybe there's a completely different evaluation model you want to do. Maybe you want to design your own, but you want to choose one that you're going to use. Then you're going to design whatever evaluation tools and methods you're going to use, surveys, focus groups, interviews, whatever you're gathering data from systems. You want to make sure you engage with your stakeholders. Then you're going to implement the evaluation. So you're going to get your stakeholders involved, make sure everything is aligned with what the objectives are, those clear objectives, implement the evaluation. You're going to analyze your data. Then you're going to report your findings so that everybody can make an informed decision. And then you update your evaluation plan. This is an iterative process. I know it doesn't look like a circle at all, but there's no real end to it. It's the update evaluation plan means you're going to go back and make sure you have clear objectives. You're constantly updating your strategy because your business needs are going to change. It's just going to happen. So be prepared for that. And when you are prepared for that, guess what? You're going to be much more efficient in your ability to roll out programs that are meaningful. So we're going to talk about now some practical tools that you can use and some techniques that will help you with your learning strategy. Now, I love quotes, so I'm always throwing them in here. But what I want you to understand is that we're living in what's called a VUCA world. And VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It's a military term, but I don't think anybody would argue that that is the world we're living in. Everything has a lot of uncertainty in it. Look at this big shift into AI. And truthfully, businesses weren't prepared. They knew it was coming. They knew they were going to have to integrate, but the speed of adoption of things like Chat GPT really just pushed everybody to a speed that they weren't prepared for. And that's why you're seeing the volatility in the job market and volatility within organizations, because they're trying to adjust to that. Remember, AI is an expensive endeavor. It's an expensive investment. It costs about 3 times more than cloud services cost. So it's expensive and time consuming, and there's a big learning curve, right? So remember that learning is the critical link to improving productivity and competitive advantage, particularly in situations that are complex and unpredictable. This is the cornerstone of how we get from where we are to where we're going, is learning. That's what fills the gap. So having a strategy for your how to evaluate your learning strategy, and then having that learning strategy is really going to help your organization and help you in your role to be more effective. So let's look at some of these tools. Well, we got a lot of them. So first we're going to look at data collection and analysis tools, and then I'm going to show you which one of these collect qualitative and which one of these collect quantitative data. And some of them do both. But you want to combine tools. You don't want to just have quantitative data. So I don't just want numbers. I actually want feedback from people. I want people to write down what they like or what they would like to see that's make it even better, etc. I need both things to be able to evaluate this. So of course we've got surveys and questionnaires. Most people are familiar with this. You can use SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, Qualtrics. I personally love Survey Sparrow. That's another one that you can use, but there's tons of them out there. And again, you can define your own. You can use Google Sheets or Google Forms. You can use Smart Sheets. So you can design your own internal ones as well. And then you've got interviews and focus groups. So those are also a tool. You have to set them up. They're a little more time consuming, but you might want to use digital recording tools, transcript software. There are all kinds of AI softwares now that you can attach to your meetings that record the whole thing and then give you notes at the end and action items and everything. It's amazing. So use something like that and just make sure that everyone knows that you're recording. And then you want to think about tools like assessment tools. So how are we going to assess everyone? And you can use, of course, things like LMS assessment tools. And those are typically what you would use to do assessment if you do have an LMS. If not, you can use surveys or pre and post assessments. I like pre and post assessments a lot because you can ask just a couple of questions. Observation tools, so you have things like behavioral checklists and rubrics. So what are you observing and what are you hoping to see and how are you evaluating it? Don't just go observe, make sure you have a tool for measuring that observation. I key code in observations a lot, so I will have things that I'm looking for, and so I'll key code those so that when I see something and I noted, I can put a number or a letter next to it to know that's how it's aligned with what I'm looking for. You want to use some analysis techniques, so statistical analysis software, SPSS. Joey and I were lamenting having to use that in college and Excel, but there are lots of statistical analysis tools that you can use. Oh, Power BI. Yes, Christy, Power BI is great. Oh, Mickey, you saw the resource. Is this for the Dr. Chung's? Oh, 10 steps, not 12 steps. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Mickey put that link in the chat. Thank you so much. So statistical analysis is important. If you don't know how to do that, make sure that somebody on your team does, or find someone internally that can help with that. Data visualization tools. I love data visualization tools. Tableau. Here's Power BI, Christy, which also can do statistical analysis. Text analysis software. Again, you can use AI for this. And NVivo, there we go. Atlas TI, those are just some. There's tons of them out there. There's so much software now, it's just ridiculous trying to figure out which ones to use. Learning analytics, obviously, so continuous monitoring and reporting tools in your LMS, and then also automated reporting tools, which also you can get from custom reports in your LMS. And then when you look at this, I want you to see that essentially you've got qualitative and quantitative data. And as you can see, there's more quantitative data that is being driven through these data collection methods, but you've got interviews and focus groups, observation tools, and text analysis software. Those will help with your qualitative data. So these are all the different tools that you can use. You can add ones in here. If somebody has another tool they'd like to share in chat, please let others know, because sharing is caring. But you want to make sure you combine both these methods so that you get rich data to choose from. And again, I'm going to be talking about this in next week's session. All right, before I move on to talking a little bit about AI, I want to know if there's any questions or comments about what we talked about so far about evaluating your learning strategy, the frameworks, the models, and some of the why, and some of the, not argument, but the discussion topics on what you can talk about within your company as to why you need to have this learning strategy. Well, I'm going to move forward. If anybody has questions, please type them in. So how do you use AI in learning strategies? Now, I'm going to tell you, I use AI all the time. And you can use it for a variety of things. So I'm going to put in, this is, I think it's mermaidlive.com. I believe that is the link. Somebody can try it out. But basically, what you can do is, like, let's say that you got a whole bunch of data from your LMS, and you wanted to take that data and put it into some kind of categories, and then you want to design some kind of workflow showing how the process of learning is going. You can use ChatGPT to put this into, take all your data, put it in there, ask it to analyze it, and then you can ask it to write the code for the diagram from that data, and you literally can just copy and paste it into Mermaid, and it will create the diagram for you like that. So tools like that can help you with visualization, can help you cut time into the work that you would be doing that you could be spending doing other things like strategizing. So definitely look for and utilize tools like that. But if you're not using ChatGPT, and some people can't use it at work, I'm assuming, but if you're not using it, try it out, because it really is a very powerful tool. Don't use it to write whole things for you, because it still is learning, and sometimes the things it writes are not that great. Thank you for fixing that, Joey. Then I think it's really important just to understand that, so that when you're moving forward with this, is just try it out, try different ways of typing things in, be very specific. One of the things you could do is, like, I didn't do this because I had already written this up, but I could have taken this PowerPoint presentation, uploaded it in ChatGPT, and say, write speaker notes for me for each slide. And it would have done that for me. Now, they might not have been great. You might have to edit them, but it's a good start, right? So anyway, but in learning strategies, one of the things that you can utilize is adaptive learning systems. So things like Docebo, Saba, Cornerstone Learning, Thomson Reuters Checkpoint Learning, Area 9 Lyceum. There are a whole bunch of other ones. And of course, they're getting added in all the time. AI is everywhere now. So think about how you might be able to add AI into your learning strategy through adaptive learning systems. That's one method. And it might be this learning system you're using is starting to add AI as well. And so how are you going to incorporate that? How are you going to have users use it? The other thing is intelligent tutoring systems or voice activated technology. So there are a bunch of intelligent tutoring systems: Carnegie Learning, Math IA, Alex, which is assessment and learning and knowledge spaces, Guru Producer. There's a whole bunch of them. These are just a few. There's also voice activated technology like Amazon Alexa for Business, Google Assistant, and IBM Watson Assistant. So you can utilize those to enhance corporate training programs. So having a tutor integrated, having voice activated technology so people can speak rather than type, especially for accessibility, is another way that you can use AI. Diane says, I've used Google Gemini to write my grading rubrics for application responses. Yes, and I think that is a really great method for doing that, right? So think about ways you can use it if you're not already, because it definitely can save you time. It's really about, you know how to do it, but you have Chat GPT design it for you or create something for you just so you don't have to take the time to do it. That's what the purpose of it is. But yeah, if you don't write whole, like, don't try to write a book is what I'm saying. You can streamline administration and leveraging your data through AI. There are automated grading and feedback, like Turnitin and Kahoot. So if you're using something where you have a lot of certification programs or people are doing something that needs to be graded, compliance, a lot of times those types of trainings, it just depends on your company. There are predictive analytics tools like Tableau, SAP Success Factors, data-driven decision making. There's learning analytics through like Moodle, Power BI, which we talked about earlier. And then in talent development, LinkedIn Learning with LinkedIn Insights and IBM Watson Talent are two AIs. If you go on LinkedIn now and you're looking for a job and you pull up and you have all of your information in your LinkedIn profile, and you pull up that job, there's an AI now where you can say, am I a good fit for this job? And it will read your profile and tell you whether you're a good fit. So look for places that are going to save you time, that aren't really about being creative, but more about being efficient. Any thoughts around cost for these connections and access, the common risks or concerns of nervous stakeholders to overcome? Yeah. And here's what I will tell you. AI so far hasn't really been expensive. And I don't think it's going to become more expensive, because the volume of people that are using it is allowing the cost to be lower. So for instance, I pay for a pro subscription to ChatGPT. It's $20 a month, right? So some of these, like Power BI, is not an inexpensive tool. And so if you were going to try to integrate that, you'd have to really do some research on how that might benefit your organization. But Moodle, I believe, is like pretty much free, or it's really low cost. So some of this is just kind of doing some investigation on what might work for your organization and figuring out how it might benefit. Also, surprisingly, you might find that your organization is using tools that you just don't know about. So they might have Power BI and you just don't know, and all you need to do is get access to it. Christy says the opportunity is to train an LLM with internal documentation like employee handbook for performance support versus training chat support with an internally developed GPT. Yes, yes, that's awesome. Yeah. So keep in mind that they might already be using some of this. I've been shocked to find out that I was trying to do something and then, oh, well, we already used that. And I was like, oh, I had no idea. So find out, find out what tools are being used. So you might be able to just leverage them. And so we have come to the end of our time together. I'm going to open up for questions, obviously, but I just want to go over some key takeaways. So the importance of a learning strategy evaluation, we talked about that. It aligns training with organizational goals. It ensures your resource efficiency and effectiveness, and it supports continuous improvement and strategic alignment. Some of the evaluation models we went over, Kirkpatrick, CIPP, and Phillips. You can use learning analytics. You can use 360-degree feedback. You want to figure out where the data is in your company. Where is it? Because they do have data. They may not be sharing it with you. You may not be able to get access to it. It depends. But where is this data? Because it's there. They have data. Then you want to look at challenges and solutions. So we talked about how you can address misalignment and resistance to change, align learning initiatives with the business outcomes. And then we went over some AI in learning strategy. So how can you use AI? You can use it in adaptive systems, intelligent tutoring, gamification. There are all kinds of different ways that you can use AI. So start really looking at different tools, find out which your organization is using and what they plan on adopting, and see how you can integrate that into learning. The best way that we could actually help people in learning is if everything was in the workflow. So if they had an AI model that was part of their workflow when they opened up their browser, where they could type in the accessed information in the organization. And that's where we will get to eventually. But in the meantime, we need to be moving towards that goal and thinking about how we can incorporate AI, because it's coming. It's not, you can't avoid it. It's going to be a part of learning regardless. So learning about it now is really critical. Okay, so, and then finally, just outcomes and future steps. So continuous improvement through feedback and data-driven decisions. Feedback, feedback, feedback. Data, data, data. If you, as a learning professional, The only way to have a strong learning strategy is to ensure that you have feedback and data to back up what you're saying. Chase the data to show the value. I love that, Christy. That's awesome. Okay, so any questions that you have from this? Like I said, I will send you, anyone that's interested, put your email if you'd like to share it, if you're okay with sharing it in chat. You can send it directly to Joey if you want, if you don't want everyone to see it. If you're interested in getting the needs assessment that I talked about so that you can use it, and you can use it to adapt. I love giving stuff away for free because again, sharing is caring, right? We're all in this together one way or the other. So yeah, so I will send the needs assessment to anybody who's interested. But any other questions or anything that came up that you didn't get an answer to that you'd like me to respond to now? And thank you all for your inputs. It was very helpful to have the things in chat and hear from you how you're doing learning evaluations.
So not a question, Michelle, but
yeah.
It's actually pronounced Docebo.
Docebo, that's right. I said Docebo, and I realized after I said it was wrong. Thank you.
Everybody does it. We used that system when I was in banking as the only reason, and I remember the reps were very much like drilling it in.
Thank you so much for letting me know. When I said it, I was like, that's not right, but I couldn't remember it's Docebo. Thank you. It's Italian. Docebo. Okay, got it. The key for strong eval is having a needs assessment up front. Yes, absolutely. Mickey, I mean, I can't emphasize enough that. And so when you see this needs assessment, you will be pleased because it's really comprehensive. And take from what you will, adapt it as you want to. It's just for you to be able to use going forward, because getting a needs assessment together can also be really challenging, trying to figure out what questions to ask in your org. So, and Joey, can you please keep track of the emails so that I can send them to everyone?
Yes, I will.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or any other ways you can help me so that I don't mispronounce things? Because that would be great. I truly appreciate that. Nothing worse than hearing it and you're like, that's not right. I love it. All right. Okay. Anything else that anyone wanted to bring up, or something I didn't cover that you just wanted some input on that comes up with people as well? Okay. Well, if we don't have any questions, then I will release you back to your work day. And I just want to say that if you would love to work with us, or if you are interested in having consultation, you can follow Insignia Training Partners on LinkedIn. You can contact us directly for a personalized consultation. And of course, we really appreciate your participation. We have a session next week on creating surveys for actionable feedback. I hope to see some of you on there as well. But thank you again for your time and for your input today. It was really enjoyable meeting all of you and spending this hour and a half of our time today together. So thank you all.